All right, we are live. I'm Dr. Lori Brotto from UBC Sexual Health Research at University British Columbia. And this YouTube Live is an opportunity to talk about mindfulness, a term that has become very popular over the last few years. And we are going to talk a little bit applied to our own work in sexual health, definitely an area of passion of mine. And then we'll do some practice together. And I firmly believe that the best way to really understand how mindfulness works is not through me telling you about how it works or sharing studies about how it works, but rather practicing it and practicing it together. So we'll save a bit of time at the end of our discussion today to talk about, to actually do a practice together. So hang tight. We will get to that in about half an hour or so, and we will do some practice together, one of my favorite practices. So let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about the background to mindfulness. And, meditation has been around for millennia, 3,000, 4,000 years. And it is a core component of religious Buddhism practice. Often when we think about meditation, we think about, or we might envision sitting in lotus pose, rows and rows of Buddhist monks on mats on the ground. And mindfulness is what we describe as being a secular version of meditation. So what that means exactly is that we don't need to have any particular religious affiliation. In fact, we don't even need to know anything about Buddhism or know even how to get into lotus pose. And mindfulness is really something that is accessible to all of us across ages, across cultures, across ethnic groups, across personal histories and how much you've done yoga or not. And so I really want to emphasize that mindfulness is a universally accessible and available practice. In fact, I often say it's right in your back pocket. If you ever watch a child in a garden or in a field of dandelions, I remember doing this when my own kids were little, they could spend what felt like an eternity just dancing through the dandelions, watching the petals float into the air, and without any sense of care in the world, certainly without distractions and without worrying about what was going to happen later on in the day. And it's a great reminder when we see children out enjoying their environment, although keep in mind right now with the current pandemic, and if you're watching this live, yes, we are still amidst the COVID pandemic and the social restriction guidelines, but there's still many ways that we can continue to be very present and very mindful at this time. In fact, I would argue it's even more important at this time of stress and uncertainty and fear and financial instability, that we have an anchor in a skill that can help us get through the day to day. I really believe mindfulness is something we should all have in our tool belts. So coming back to a little bit about the history of mindfulness now. So in about the late 1970s, John Cabots, who was a molecular biologist at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, he was well on track to pursue a scientific academic career. He one day attended a lecture that was led by a Master Zen Buddhist, and essentially converted his life at that point, began meditating right away, began to experience his own firsthand benefits of just what impact paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally, had on his own life and his own struggles and his own stress and his own coping. So shortly after that, because he was affiliated with Massachusetts General Hospital, he approached the doctors at the pain clinic there. And this was a clinic that was known for really trying to work with the most intractable pain. So these were patients who had really chronic and debilitating pains for years, if not decades. None of the conventional treatment approaches, medications, or physical aids or surgeries did much to help them. And John Kabat-Zinn went to the physicians at the pain center and said, send me the patients who have the most difficult pains, the ones you're frustrated with, the ones who are not responding to the different treatments that you have been offering to them. And I want to work with them. And so he brought a group of patients together in a room. He took what he had learned from the meditation lecture that he went to, and he really simplified the language and boiled it down to practicing present moment, non-judgmental awareness. And what he said to the people was, as long as you're breathing, there is more right with you than wrong with you. And this was so powerful, so validating for these individuals who felt like, there was something wrong with them, that they were not responding to all of the various treatments that doctors were giving them, that they were somehow permanently broken, and perceived that everyone else got better, and why couldn't they? And so John Kabat-Zinn's message was very simple. It was, focus on the sensations that make up this feeling of pain. And we're not going to use the language of pain. We're not going to imagine pain. We're not going to bring up the storyline of pain, of how you came to the chronic pain and what you've tried. Rather, what we're going to do through our instruction is really tune into the sensations that make up this discomfort of pain. So his instructions went along the lines of, notice where you feel discomfort, what sensations of tightness or temperature or vibrations or texture. Do the feelings come and go? What kind of shape do they have? Do they move from one part of the body to the other? And so really the invitation was, let's strip away the language of pain and suffering, and why me, which many of these patients had struggled with for, again, years, if not decades. And for the first time ever, they experienced some safety and some comfort in tuning in. For the first time, no one had ever suggested to them that tuning into discomfort actually trumps tuning out. What I mean by that is, it can be a more effective way of coping with chronic pain than distraction and ignoring and moving away from it. So essentially, that's what they did. From there, the sessions evolved. And John Kabat-Zinn always did this in a group format, because it was really important that people in the group could see modeling from other people in the group and how to do this, that they could validate one another and say to one another, yeah, this is hard. I'm getting distracted. I'm being pulled away. I'm in so much physical pain right now that it's hard to concentrate. And yet being in the group environment, as they looked around the room and saw others breathing along, noticing along, staying present along with John Kabat-Zinn's instructions, it gave them a lot of motivation and a lot of hope. So that was late 1970s. Shortly after that, John Kabat-Zinn wrote a fantastic book called Full Catastrophe Living. And the title might seem a bit overwhelming. Who would pick up the title with Full Catastrophe Living in the title itself? But his rationale was that, each of us in our own way, we have our own version of suffering, whether it's a chronic pain or chronic depression or chronic stress. We're kind of living out the catastrophes of our lives every day, sometimes all day long, sometimes minute by minute. And if we can really live out each moment and stay with that discomfort, whether it's physical or emotional, then we can still really live our life to the fullest. And again, as I mentioned earlier, tuning in always trumps tuning out. So the early research on John Kabat-Zinn's work with his mindfulness-based stress reduction program, it was researched, and it was found to work in the sense that it helped people live better. They began leaving their homes. They began going for walks again. They began having social interactions with people that they had cut off for years. They began to resume some of the hobbies and activities that for years they had told themselves, I can't do those anymore because of my pain. And they were living again for the first time in years or decades. What was fascinating is that in addition to these improvements in their quality of life, their actual pain intensity started to go down. And that's really interesting because what we're doing in mindfulness through paying attention non-judgmentally moment by moment is it brings us into the here and now so that we don't get as wrapped up in the storyline of suffering. So it makes sense that the quality of life improved because we're staying in the present. But it is fascinating. It was fascinating, and it still is to this day, that this technique can actually reduce pain intensity. So fast forward 40 years, and we actually know now why that happens, how that happens. In fact, there's been beautiful neuroimaging studies where people will go into a scanner and a scanner looks at different parts of the brain while people are practicing a mindfulness, or maybe while they're imagining their pains. And what's fascinating is sometimes if you are someone living with chronic pain, thinking about the pain can be enough to elicit the physical sensations of the pain itself. And it's not made up. This is a real phenomenon, and it has to do with the pain centers being so primed to feel pain intensity that they fire inappropriately. So, what we know today is that mindfulness actually changes the brain, and it changes it in pretty fundamental ways. So, in the case of pain, it means that when a person is feeling physical discomfort, it's really just the pain centers that become lit up or activated, not the thinking centers, the thinking about why me, won't this go away. The emotion centers are not lit up, the sadness and anxiety and sorrow and anger about the pain, those stay quiet. So, mindfulness meditation is a way of changing our brain so that we can cope. Now, I've talked a lot about pain so far, and it's because that's really where mindfulness made its entry into Western medicine, Western healthcare. But it's since been expanded and applied to many other mental health issues like depression. So, depression, chronic depression, all of us get sad and have blues every once in a while, but chronic depression is where someone feels extreme sadness, let's say for 2 weeks or more days than not, and more hours of the day than not. So feelings of sadness, hopelessness, helplessness. Helplessness is the feeling of no matter what I do, I can't improve my situation. There may be a lack of interest in other activities, which we call apathy, changes in appetite and sleeping patterns. And for some people with chronic depression, there might be such extreme feelings of hopelessness that they consider ending their life. And of course, that's suicidal ideation, a very disastrous outcome of chronic depression. So, mindfulness has not only been applied to depression, it's been found to be extremely effective for people who are currently in the throes of a depression, who are currently facing extreme low mood, and also for people who have recovered from a depression as a way of protecting them from a recurrence, from another depression coming back. And so, if we think about what depression is, for a lot of people, it's a tendency to ruminate over over past events, past failures, past things that we've done wrong, and it's this tendency to kind of reflect and ruminate over and over in a really negative and judgmental way that is a big part of the picture of chronic depression. So again, mindfulness, which is about coming into the here and now, makes a lot of sense for depression. The idea being that if we can bring the focus of your attention into the here and now, focusing on your body and what's happening, that might be a way of keeping you safe, keeping you in the present and away from the tendency to drift into the past. And again, lots of research finding that mindfulness is really, really helpful for depression. Anxiety is another domain. Lots of people feel anxiety, again, especially now during this time of the COVID pandemic. Anxiety is completely understandable. And unlike depression, which relates to ruminative memories and feelings about the past, anxiety is really about the future, a fear of uncertainty, a worry about what's to come, a feeling of, oh my gosh, what if I can't control what's going to happen? So, anxiety might be, say, a person who has public speaking anxiety. What's going to happen if I get up on that stage to speak and nothing comes out of my mouth, right? So, they have people who face anxiety have these almost catastrophic beliefs and images about what's going to happen in the future. So depression is characterized by ruminative feelings in the past. Anxiety is characterized by catastrophic and irrational worries and thoughts and feelings about the future. And mindfulness, again, has been applied very successfully to anxiety as a way of keeping you rooted in the here and now, using the same instructions. Notice these sensations in the here and now and stay with them over and over and over. So these are two of the domains that mindfulness has really been adapted to, but over the last 30 or so years, it's also been adapted and found to be quite effective for other issues that we all struggle with: inattention, hyperactivity, impulsive behaviors like maybe the tendency to overeat or overdrink, overgamble, sexual compulsions as well. Mindfulness has been applied and found to be quite useful for a variety of different mental health related struggles that many people have. So, how did I become interested in mindfulness as it relates to sexuality? Well, of course, sexual concerns are really common. We know if we're looking at women, at least a third of women will have chronic sexual health issues like loss of interest in sex, pain with sexual contact or sexual intercourse, difficulties getting aroused, problems reaching orgasm. Again, about a third of women. Rates for men are also pretty high, not quite as high as they are for women, but for men, low desire is really common, and it's not just a phenomenon that impacts older men. I certainly see a lot of young men in their 30s and 20s in my practice claiming that they've lost all desire for sex and they feel so broken because our culture perpetuates this idea, this myth that if we're not immediately and always interested in sex, that there's something wrong with us, that we're broken. So, with sexual health concerns, there's often issues of depression, mood changes, anxiety, worrying, stress, chronic pains, and a variety of other issues that go along with sexual health concerns or sexual dysfunction. So, mindfulness actually makes a lot of sense for that population as well. And it's the situation where, what we found in the research, that in addition to mindfulness improving the associated mood and anxiety and stress issues, it has also been found pretty consistently now across our studies to improve different facets of sexual response, like improving desire, improving sexual satisfaction, for men, improving control over sexual arousal. In fact, the body of science has been so convincing, so powerful in my estimation, that I summarized a lot of it in my book, Better Sex Through Mindfulness. And it's really a distillation of the science of mindfulness as it's been applied to sexuality. So, mindfulness is something that I use a lot, not only in my research, but in my clinical practice and also in my life. Again, during this time of social distancing and really missing, seeing, and touching and hugging the people that are important to me, I've definitely felt the brunt of increased stress and increased responsibilities and homeschooling kids and that sort of thing. And my own personal mindfulness practice has definitely ramped up in the last 2 months. And again, it's as simple as a reminder of, if we can stay in the present moment, if we can ride out those waves of discomfort, of uncertainty, of instability, of ruminative thoughts, if we can just stay in the safety of here and now, that's a great place to be. It's when we start to jump into the future and worry about what's going to happen, things we have no control over, or slip into the past. Why didn't I do this better? Why didn't I have that conversation? Why didn't I save that relationship? That's really the source of our suffering. So that's mindfulness in a nutshell, really distilled down version, because again, the really art of mindfulness is in the practice. So let's get to some of the questions first that are coming in. So first question that I see that came in: how do I start practicing mindfulness when I don't have much time to set aside for it? It's a perennial question I get asked all the time, which is, I have no time, and that's part of the source of my stress. Is that I don't even have 5 minutes to do self care and take time out. How on earth am I going to find time to do a 30-minute meditation or mindfulness practice every day? And, I often use analogies. And I think of mindfulness as a muscle in our brain, right? So if we want to strengthen that muscle of mindfulness, we need to practice it in the same way that if you want to strengthen the muscles of your, I don't know, back, if you're a rock climber and you want to strengthen those back muscles, you've got to put the time in to break down the muscle so that it rebuilds bigger and better and stronger than before. And mindfulness works the same way. And when we think about it that way, um, remembering that mindfulness is essentially a brain activity. We can change our brains. We are not born with static brains that remain fixed and unchanged for the rest of our life. That was kind of old thinking, maybe 30 years ago thinking, that you're kind of born with your maximum number of synaptic connections or neurons in your brain. And over the course of your life, those would decrease with time. The science actually completely refutes that. And in fact, our experiences in our life can create new synaptic connections. We see this in individuals who've had traumatic brain injury of some sort or a spinal cord injury, that through physical practice in their body and even through thinking exercises, we can see new neural connections in the brain. Mindfulness has been found to do this. So, in addition to mindfulness leading to different parts of the brain firing in different ways, mindfulness can actually lead to new growth of neural centers in the brain, new neurons, new synaptic connections. So, how do we get there? Through practice. So, I can't create time in our days. We only have a fixed amount of time, and there's lots of important and really required things that we do. Work and family and relationships and community responsibilities and volunteering and other forms of self-care. And so it really is about, how do I maybe start small, maybe for 5 minutes a day, but start to do it consistently. And so find the time in your day, the 5 minutes per day, that you are most likely to stick with a practice. And maybe it's a different time every day, but do schedule it and do stick with it. The data tell us that it's the consistent practice over and over, the daily practice, that really is quite important. And so I see another question that has come up, which is, how many minutes per day do I need to do mindfulness in order to benefit from it? So in our own groups that we run through the University of British Columbia, while participants are in our 8-week groups, we do recommend that they do at least a 30-minute mindfulness practice every day, 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day for 8 weeks. That's a lot of practice. But because for a lot of them, that's their first introduction into mindfulness, it's really important to immerse yourself and get a solid foundation of mindfulness practice. And then maybe after the 8 weeks, you loosen up a little bit. Instead of 30 minutes a day, You might do 10 minutes a day. And if there's a day where you have a little bit more time, maybe that day you do a longer practice. The research seems to suggest that more regular practice, even if they're briefer, seem to be more beneficial than, say, a single time per week where you're doing a really long practice. But you do the best you can with the time that you have. There are lots of apps that are available, long list of different apps. Some of my favorite ones are Headspace and Happify and Bootify and Calm. But you can hop onto YouTube and essentially just look up guided mindfulness practice. And you'll see lots of all different varying lengths. So those are the guided practices where you might be listening along to a guide, and we'll get there in just a few minutes to give you a bit of a taste of what that looks like. But you can also do it unguided. And this might be something where if you are a bit more experienced in your mindfulness practice, maybe you've done an 8-week course or you've spent the last month doing a consistent daily formal meditation practice, you might prefer to start to do your own unguided one. So maybe you set a timer, and there are apps where you can set a timer where you have the beautiful chimes that ring after 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then you can just do your own quiet self-guided practice. So again, more regular practice seems to be more beneficial than a single time per week of a longer session. So that was a great question I was asked. Another question I got asked was, I've tried practicing mindfulness, but every time I try, my mind wanders to things I'm anxious about or things I should be doing instead. Does this mean that I'm just not cut out for mindfulness? No. In fact, all of our minds wander. Our minds are like puppies, curious young puppies. There's so much that brings our mind away from the present moment. There's so many distractions, often benign distractions, pop-ups that come up on your screen or on your phone, or sounds in the room or smells in the house or what have you. And so our minds very, very quickly move from place to place. And in the same way that with a curious puppy who takes off on the leash, and we gently guide the puppy back, we gently tug on the leash and bring the puppy back to us, we want to have the same orientation to our minds when our minds take off. So rather than being hard on yourself, if you find a mindfulness practice difficult because you get distracted, you start thinking about your to-do list, you start wondering, did I turn off the stove? Did I lock the front door? Is someone going to walk in? Oh my gosh, how long is it? Can I check my clock? Oh, I heard a notification beep on my phone. As those thoughts come up, you just observe, my mind took off, and bring it back. And so we want to give ourselves a lot of permission for our minds to do what they do, which is they go everywhere. And furthermore, I sometimes get a bee in my bonnet about multitasking and that word multitasking and the number of times that I hear people say, and I've certainly been accused of this myself, I'm such a great multitasker. I can, have 4 screens open on my computer at once while I'm eating my lunch and tending to my text messages and ordering my groceries on the side all at the same time, as if we're able to do that. And we're not able to do that. None of our brains are capable of fully multitasking at the same time. We may think we are, but actually what happens when we shift from focus on one thing to another is there's a bit of a delay. It takes a bit of time for the brain to let go of that task and restart up again on the next task. And it's called cognitive load. It's something researchers have studied quite well. And it adds up over time. It results in taking more time to do tasks. It results in making more mistakes with doing tasks. And it results in lower quality of satisfaction with the different tasks that we do. So this is a gentle encouragement to abandon that feeling that we want to multitask. We don't want to multitask. We want to do things fully, one thing at a time. So, awesome question. Um, how is mindfulness supposed to help my relationship? So that's also been another area of a lot of research. And, when relationships go well, fantastic. We're happy, we're feeling blissful, we're feeling connected. And when relationships don't go well, maybe there's arguments or disagreements over values or decisions to be made or priorities, it can create a lot of stress in our lives, and a lot of conflict. And sometimes what happens within a relationship is we really struggle to see things from a partner's point of view. That's called empathy. Empathy is our ability to sort of take another person's point of view, even if it's not our own, and understand their feelings from their perspective. And empathy is a really powerful part of relationship happiness. And so empathy is something that we really want to practice when our relationships are in conflict, or if we're struggling with lots of fights in our relationship. And one of the best ways of cultivating empathy is mindfulness practice. So there's a whole series of exercises that you can actually do alongside with a partner. One that I love involves one partner and the other partner just putting their hands against each other. And the mindfulness practice is about not only tuning into your own sensations, your own feelings in the moment, but also those points of contact between your hand and your partner's hand, or your back and your partner's back. I also love to do this standing back to back with a partner. So it's very much rooted in sensations, but because it encourages us to practice perspective taking, feeling that there's another person there, it's actually been found to cultivate empathy, which again is really, really great for relationships, great for sexuality too, by the way. And so again, take home message there is mindfulness is great for our mental health, our mood, our relationships, our ability to cope with stress, to get through uncertainty, to stay in the here and now, and fend off the tendency to ruminate over past events or worry unrealistically about events that might happen in the future. And again, this time of uncertainty with COVID and social isolation and all of our public health guidelines about staying distant from people, it's a now is the time to start a mindfulness practice. So with that, we're going to do a mindfulness practice together. Enough of me talking about it. As I said, the best way to learn mindfulness is to actually practice it. So we're going to do this together. It's going to be about 10 minutes. So if you notice yourself getting a little bit restless, just notice it. It just gives you more to observe as we do this practice together. It's only going to be 10 minutes, and then we can get back to all of the other obligations on our to-do list, lunch, and other things like that. So if you notice your mind taking off, just tell yourself, I will get to you for 10 minutes. I'm going to be with myself. I'm going to be right here. So find a comfortable position. I'm sitting right now. You can be lying down. You can be standing against a wall. You can be sitting cross-legged on the floor. Whatever position promotes relaxed wakefulness. So this is not about falling asleep. This is about falling awake. So keep that in mind as you're choosing your position. If you do choose to lie down, you may want to keep your eyes a little bit open, or else I will put you to sleep. I promise I will put you to sleep. I've put many people to sleep in my mindfulness groups in the past. So if you're lying down, keep your eyes open. Even if you're sitting up, keep your eyes a little bit open. If you feel like you're going to doze off. All right, so settling into a comfortable position. What we're going to be doing now is just observing the sensations in the body as they arise. But it's also an opportunity to observe what our minds do when we try and focus. We might notice a tendency to want to move away from sensations that feel unpleasant, avoid them. And in other cases, we might notice a tendency to gravitate to feelings that feel really good. So, what we're going to do is we're going to try and adopt a neutral stance towards whatever sensations come up, spending as much time with the sensations that feel good as we do with the sensations that feel not so good. So, getting started, it's always good to thank yourself right from the outset. Thank yourself for taking the time to be here. And we're going to begin by just letting the body find its own natural, comfortable position, guiding your attention now onto the sensations of breathing in whatever region they're most vivid in this moment. Whether that's in the belly or the chest or the nostrils. Feeling the sensations as you breathe in and the sensations in those parts of the body as you breathe out. So we're not changing the breath. We're not deliberately trying to breathe deeper or slower or softer or better. We're just breathing and just observing, not changing anything, just allowing the body to breathe itself. Our body breathes even without us telling it to. So let it breathe and just observe. And you might use descriptions such as coolness of air, particular sounds, whether it's wisping sounds or deep sighs. You can also locate if there's any vibration or tightness or looseness as you're paying attention to the sensations of the breath. And really using that language of bare sensations. So we're not thinking about breathing. We're letting the body breathe and we're just observing, almost as if you were sitting on the bank of a stream, watching the breath happen, describing the breath. And of course, there's going to be other thoughts, memories of a conversation earlier today, planning thoughts for where you will go after this is over. And this is an opportunity to acknowledge that, yeah, our minds are busy and guide it back to the sensations of breathing. And whenever a physical sensation in another part of the body becomes predominant, maybe there's a feeling in your shoulders or your lower back or your feet, whenever those become predominant, you can momentarily take that to be the new focus of attention and bring the same level of mindful awareness to that sensation. What temperature do I feel? What texture? What sensations are there? What sounds are there? Is there a tightness or a coolness or a relaxed feeling? And then, of course, the mind might move to a different area of the body. And when that happens, temporarily letting go of the first area and taking the new area to now be the focus of your attention. Using the same lens of fully feeling the bare sensations that are there, vibrations, prickling, discomfort maybe, temperature. tension, looseness. And so for a few moments, we can simply let our mind either stay put in a particular area of the body or let the confinement loosen a little bit and see where our mind goes within our body, temporarily resting there in awareness and doing so non-judgmentally. So if you move to a part of the body where there might be some discomfort, or maybe it's an area that's bringing up negative thoughts, negative memories, or negative images, maybe an old accident or injury that happened, we might feel a tendency to get pulled into a story. Again, we're going to stay firmly planted at the bank, the side of the stream. And we're not going to jump into the water. We're just going to observe the sensations in that part of the body unfold. So it is about feeling and observing what is there, not about thinking about why that feeling is there. And as we sit and focus on the different sensations, again, there might be feelings of liking certain areas. If it's a place of warmth and comfort, maybe it's deep in the pit of the belly, place of relaxation and looseness and comfort. We might notice that we really want to stay there, something we call attachment. That's something you can observe as well. What does it feel like to want to stay with a certain area? And similarly, areas of discomfort or pain, we might notice a tendency to want to ignore or move away from, something we call avoidance. What does that feel like? And it can be really helpful for us as we build our mindfulness practice to get to know attachment and avoidance really well, in addition to getting to know the sensations really well. And what we will try to do in our practice, and maybe we can do this for the remaining few moments we have together, is we're going to try and be open to observing equally the places that we gravitate towards that feel good, and the places that we might be avoiding, the places of discomfort or pain or agony. Something we call equanimity, having equal openness to whatever comes up for us, bringing that same attitude of non-judgmental observation and awareness. And so we're going to continue that now for just a minute together, and I'll be silent as we breathe together in our community for just one more minute, observing the sensations and observing the follow-on attachment and aversion or neutrality towards those sensations. And now gradually forming the intention to maybe introduce a little bit of movement into your fingertips, into your toes, and then watching how that intention gets translated into actual movement of the fingers and toes. You can also form an intention to open your eyes and again watch how that intention in our mind and our brain actually translates into movements of the eyelids opening, of sitting up, of coming together in these last brief moments that we have together. So, my hope during this brief mindfulness practice that we've done is that for any of you who are new to mindfulness, it's given you just a little taste of what it looks like. My hope is that you feel like you have all the expertise you need. You have, there is no need for any additional training to implement mindfulness in your life. As John Cabots said, if you're alive and you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. And so mindfulness, which is always in our back pockets, we need to remember it's there. We need to remember that it's a skill that we can draw upon during times of stress and uncertainty and anxiety and sadness and anger and guilt. But even in those moments of joy, while we're enjoying a great meal, while we start to resume very slowly social interactions with people we love. And those are going to be moments of mindfulness when we're able to see one another face to face again. And we want to relish in that. And mindfulness is one way to do so. So, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been great. I always I'm grateful to be able to take time out of my own busy day to practice present moment non-judgmental awareness. And it's been a real treat and an honor to share this time with you all today. So, wishing you all the very best.